And welcome back to the Black Psychologist Podcast, episode 13. We are rolling. First and foremost, thank you for tuning in and watching and subscribing. The numbers are growing and we couldn't be happier. So thank you again for watching on YouTube, for listening on Pandora, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, all the Google podcasts, all those things. We appreciate all that, guys. So episode 13, here we are. And I am your humble host, one half of your hosting duo, Dr. Kyle Osborne, your hosting clinician. And of course, I'm never ever here by myself. I'm here with guys want to be him, girls think they can change him. The one and only Dr. Jason Coleman. How are you, brother?
Hey man, what's up, man? What's going on, bro? How
Hey,
you?
hey man, I'm good, man. We're here. In the middle of the week, man. We out here doing it, getting it done.
Bro, can't complain, man. We got good weather in Philly today.
Hey, man, listen, I'll take it, bro. I'll take
hmm
this all year round.
Word, word,
you
word.
know so again, thank everybody for listening. Episode 13, we're about to get this thing started. All right. So this past Saturday, R&B fans were treated to an amazing versus battle between two of the best female R&B groups to ever do it. We had Escape and SWV. They were playing a lot of good joints all throughout the show. If you got an opportunity to watch or to listen, it was an amazing show. A lot of uh, classic throwback R&B joints that a lot of us grew up listening to. However, during the course of the show, especially during the early portions in the first half, a lot of fans noticed that Coko of SWV didn't seem like she was herself. A lot of fans had commented and gave some feedback during the first half of the show that they noticed that occasionally or discreetly, Coco, when she came and joined when they introduced them, that she kind of discreetly wiped away her tears. They noticed that her leg would be shaking at times, and to notice even when she first came out that she didn't have a mic like her other two you know, part of the group. And so that was noticeable. So I think maybe she got feedback from, maybe from the viewers on IG and on the other different platforms. And so what Coco did shortly thereafter the show ended, she actually indicated on her IG page that the night before, while she's preparing for the show, a woman was killed outside of her hotel that she was staying at, and she talked about it and briefly talked about it on her IG page. And I'm gonna read what she reported. She said, "Last night while I was preparing for the verses, a lady outside my hotel window was shot." She said, "To see and to hear the four shots and then seeing her laying on the ground and all this blood was unbelievable. Then when I got to the venue, I had a really bad anxiety attack, literally crying and screaming. Yeah, y'all saw me looking uncomfortable and irritated during the first half of the show, but if it wasn't for my son, I probably wouldn't have been out there at all. Thank you for calming me down and understanding my mental." So that's what Coco released, and a lot of people, some of the feedback and love she was getting from a lot of the fans was it was amazing, to see that outpouring of support. So Jay, when you saw this and came across your desk, what were your thoughts about this?
Well, I definitely felt for her in that situation. I immediately started just thinking about like community violence, in general, and vicarious trauma, right? Because again, like this is the type of situation where individuals are going to interpret it differently.
Mhm.
So one person can see somebody get into a car accident, kind of continue with their day. Somebody else, seeing somebody laid out with the sheets over them, blood, all those things, those images and those things can kind of stay with you. Um, so I thought about both of those things, right? Because and one of them kind of goes hand in hand with the other, right? Because I don't know, where she was at, so I don't really want to kind of talk about the area, but we have a lot of communities where we see gun violence, right? Um, and individuals kind of similar to what we were not conflating those two situations, but kind of what we was talking about before in terms of people not having a chance to heal, right? Sometimes when you see them situations over and over, or you get used to, about, gunshot victims on the news, or seeing people shot, the tendency could be to just move on, right? So you could see a lot of people saying like, well, it didn't happen to her, she didn't know the person, why did that impact, her performance, but again, when we talk about vicarious trauma, we got to understand, things don't necessarily have to happen to you for you to have a traumatic response. So to me, this is like a classic case of it. um, I got to give her a lot of credit for being willing to talk about it, right? And her family members for supporting her. Um, but I mean, it's difficult, right? And I think the point that people should take from this is that when you do experience trauma, it impacts your ability to do other things, right? Like perform, right? So singing, dancing, remembering her songs, her concentration, her attention, all of those things obviously were affected, right? Because the fans noticed immediately, right? She forgot her microphone,
Right. Hmm.
so we got to be more sensitive, just to kind of bring it home to our kids who see violent acts on a daily basis, right? They come home, we expect them to just jump back into their routine, right? Our kids who see things walking to school, coming back from school. Think about Chicago. You know what I mean? Think about some of those things, not to, paint the whole Chicago with a broad brush, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Some of those areas where they getting down. Think about what some of those kids gotta see coming back and forth to school and just move on from. And there's a lot of people, we've talked about it here, right? About some of the people that are on the ground, with that coffee, hip hop, and mental health and other things, right? Trying to help. But it's because of this. It's because of community violence and vicarious trauma. So, um, it's unfortunate that it had to happen, but I think it's good that she's talking about it.
Yeah, like something that stood out for me is that it's good for us to keep in mind and maintain that awareness of that you never know what somebody is pushing through,
Right,
right?
right.
Like you never know when someone comes on stage or you see them in front of you, you never know what's going behind or what's going on in that person's, you know, what they just experienced. And you're right, this is trauma, right? She witnessed a traumatic event, whether she saw the person that was killed or she heard the shots, and then you actually see, someone that's, been killed outside of your window. This is trauma. And without getting too much into, attempting to diagnose her, because we're not able to do anything of that nature, and I don't know her history, and haven't spoken to her in any form or fashion. But this looks like or appears to be like she would be experiencing similar to acute stress, right?
Right.
like like you mentioned, she was feeling, irritated. She was feeling uncomfortable, was like noticeable by a lot of the viewers. And this is, a lot of symptoms that reflect or look like someone that's experiencing acute stress, right? Within the first couple of days, you're going to experience those dissociative symptoms. You're going to feel detached or like emotionally unresponsive, or, feel uneasy or that increased heart rate. So if you're having trouble breathing or you're experiencing an increased heart rate, that usually resembles or looks like, an anxiety attack, which is what she said she had experienced. And yeah, you're absolutely right. For her to be able to go out on stage and be able to, get immersed into, the show. And I saw towards the end of the first half, she did the Patti LaBelle cover, the Only You Knew, and she killed that note.
Right.
She hit that note the way only Coko can do. And for her to be able to do that, considering what she had just experienced. And she, they kind of alluded to it a little bit, where they said, y'all don't know what, I've been through, or what's been going on for me to be here. And then she was able to shine some light on it. Shows a lot of strength. It also shows a lot of strength and resilience on her part and with her family, right? Because she mentioned her son, she mentioned her family that were able to help her get through that. So just the power of, her family and that social support to help her get through it. I can't imagine, being in that situation, and like 24 hours, less than 24 hours, I got to get ready to be in front of millions of people to do so. So, I think it's definitely something we have to keep in mind of when you see somebody in front of you and you kind of see them off, right? You kind of see them, you know, displaying some atypical behavior. They're usually outgoing and they're not. Yeah, there's something else going on there, right? Like you just mentioned, whether it be Chicago, whether it be Atlanta, whether it be Philly, it's hot right now,
Right.
unfortunately. And like when you have kids that see this, they have to walk past it every day, and then you expect them, like you said, to go to class and focus on the lesson at hand. Nah, that's not the way it goes. If they are able to do that, that means that that's a separate problem in itself. That means the kids are probably being desensitized, and they're actually able to do that because they become so used to it, which is a problem. So, um, for me, I'm hoping that being that this just took place, we're at about, a little less than a week of when she said the issue or the incident took place, is that I'm hoping that in addition to her family support, I'm hoping that she's able to talk to somebody because and I know that for those, if this is acute stress, then and she's already experiencing some of those symptoms, like the uneasiness, the irritability, maybe some flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, whatever it might be. I hope that she seeks out professional help, that she's able to talk to a counselor or a therapist to get in front of it, because and I know if you don't, and these symptoms continue to manifest, they can manifest into PTSD, right? After 30 days or a month or so. So I'm hoping that she's able to get the support that she needs professionally, and she gets it to her family. But yeah, my heart goes out, and absolutely, man, that is the symbol of resiliency that she was able to get out there and perform after what she saw.
I mean, the only thing I would kind of add is I think, this because of her stature, this could go a long way in terms of like kind of breaking down stigma, kind of brick by brick, for lack of a better term. And I just say that because when we bring it to like a bigger issue of community violence, there probably a lot of people, well, not probably, there are a lot of people suffering in silence, right?
Hmm.
Because they either feel like, it's something that they really shouldn't talk about or that nobody really kind of cares about, right? And we're talking about serious things, right? We're talking about the difference between living in an environment where, you know, you can expect safety, and living in an environment where you can't. And that's a very big thing, right? In terms of whether you're going to be hypersensitive, to a threat, and kind of how these symptoms are going to be expressed, right? How early they're going to be expressed, how prominent, all of these things. So, not to get into it too deep, but I just think that for somebody of her stature to kind of address it in this manner, it may go a long way in terms of other people feeling comfortable to talking about it, or other people kind of picking up the baton and kind of addressing this issue, right? Because there's a lot of people that are going to experience that are experiencing vicarious trauma, whether it be through community violence, COVID-19, and residual impact of that, and just a bunch of things. So yeah, good luck to her.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of bravery on her part. So we wish her the best, and hopefully, like we talked about, she gets the support that she needs. Keeping with the music front, um, Wale, very, very talented rapper. I'm a big fan of Wale and his work. So Wale, some time ago, he talked about some of the issues that he's experienced, some of the issues that he's seen from other artists in the music industry, and as far as dealing with a lot of stress and mental health issues. And he says that the record deals should come with mental health insurance. He mentions a lot of the constant negative comments and the feedback, and the attention that the music artists are exposed to, and how difficult and how stressful it is to kind of navigate the music industry. So he feels that, yeah, with you get your record deal, that everything, that a lot of aspiring artists are waiting to get, and they work so hard to do and get and achieve, that it should come also with mental health insurance. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, before I even respond to that, Wale, Maybach Music representative,
Yeah.
DMV. Of course, I like Wale. Of course, he speaks from his heart, and he's always been, that's not me kind of making just a broad statement. He kind of speaks from his heart. He's passionate about stuff he believes in. So I'm gonna speak to the intent and not necessarily to um, whether it's realistic or not. Right? I'm not gonna pretend to say that I'm like an expert on contracts. I don't know that musical artists deserve specific mental health insurance. I don't know that I agree with that point. Now, I know that I agree with. I think that it would be reasonable for them to have the same access to the executives that hire them to that
Mm-hmm.
insurance.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, for them to have a specific plan because their job is so stressful, no, I don't support that. I'm sorry. Like that's where the passion kind of overrides reality to a sense, right? Because in that sense, it's like everybody would that has a high stress job should have extra mental health insurance, right? Surgeons, firemen, right? These are high stress jobs. And some people will tell you a little bit more stressful, than signing autographs and having the pressure to put out a number one album. Not diminishing people's creative abilities. You understand what I'm saying? But there's
Right.
a difference if you're on top of somebody's house trying to save a baby, and you know what I mean. You trying to make the next thing rock and KOD. It's a little different, right? So,
Right.
but like I said, I'm gonna speak to the passion and to the intent of the statement, right? So I agree with the intent. Um, I think artists should have access, you know what I mean? And I think that record labels should definitely support artists that have mental health issues, right? But should they have like a specific plan for them and be prioritized because of their stressors? No.
So my thought process on it was I believe that they should have mental health insurance the same way how, like you said, anyone else that works for the record label has health insurance, right?
Right.
And the first thing that I thought about were athletes, right? So athletes, which tend to be synonymous with music, right? You got artists, that want to be athletes, athletes that want to be artists, they're all entertainers, right? To some extent.
Right.
And the first thing that popped into my head was that NFL players, NBA players, MLB, they all have insurance while they're with the teams, right?
Right.
So while you're with the team, they have insurance, they're covered, right? Not even just if they get injured, but they're actually given an health plan that also includes mental health, right? It's the same way how most people work. However, the big difference with that is they have all these players, they have a collective bargaining agreement, right? So each league has a players association.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a union, they have a players association that fights for them or organizes or agrees to these things ahead of time, right? Or for everyone that falls underneath the whatever the sport umbrella. So that's how they're able to obtain it. Unfortunately, music artists don't have it.
Right.
So I don't know if that's something that would ever take place as far as them getting established with an association or um, some type of union. But I do feel and believe that they should have insurance, like just overall, like medical insurance, but absolutely mental health insurance. Not so much that their job is more stressful than, say, like you mentioned, like a fireman or a surgeon or anything, but just so they have coverage, just because if something were to take place, we tend to see these adverse reactions, right? We tend to see them indulge in a lot of different vices and things because they're on the road, they're on all these different places. And I don't believe I'm not a music artist. I'm not really plugged into that world, but I always wonder, like, well, are they covered, right? Because they don't have a regular 9 to 5, or they don't have an organization that they belong to that says, hey, while you're out on the road, if something takes place, you witness a traumatic event, something, whatever the case may be, here you can go to the hospital or you can get signed up with this therapist and you're not paying out of pocket, right?
Right.
I always looked at it like, well, if you're signed to Interscope, right? You signed to Dre, you signed with Kendrick, you signed, the media artist and relations associate who works at Interscope, they got insurance, they got a 401k plan, they got all these other different things. But you mean to tell me that the artist who's on the road, and yeah, sure, he's probably making a lot more money off of shows, record deals, whatever maybe happen, but that person doesn't have coverage? So in that sense, I agree with Wale, where it's like, well, they have to be. I think they should be afforded some type of coverage if something were to take place. But not. I don't know if they need to have something specifically for music artists to say, well, your mental health coverage is going to be X, Y, Z, and the third, and it's going to be different from any other Interscope employee or Def Jam employee because they just work in the corporate side of it. So that's kind of like my thought process when I read it.
I mean, that's why I said I think they should have access to the same coverage everybody else has in the building, right?
Right.
Um, But then when we start saying, well, they should be prioritized because, because what he was talking about in the article, I mean, his example, right? He started talking about Instagram and negative comments,
Right.
right? And that's part of the stress of the job. And that's why I went to where I went in terms of talking about surgeons and firemen, right? Because when we start talking about stress of the job, Wale's argument falls apart very quickly. You understand what I'm saying? Um, and again, I think they should have access to that, right? So, which means I'm in agreement with you. If they're out on the road, right, employed by Epic, employed by Interscope, whatever, and they witness a murder, something traumatic happens, they should have access to services, right? But some level of personal responsibility is necessary, right? And I'm not saying all rappers behave
Right.
irresponsibly, but they don't, right? Because they don't. But if somebody is like, and I go back to my previous example, firefighters got stress, teachers got stress, principals got stress. If they go do a whole bunch of drugs and alcohol, they just got to deal with the consequences of it. So you mean to tell me that somebody who's making millions of dollars, making songs, riding around because they choose to go buy pills because they have more money and access, I gotta pay for it. I'm just being honest. So again, but let's be clear about what I'm saying, right?
Right.
On the job, if you're in the arena and somebody gets, God forbid, trampled, right? If if you're on the tour bus, God forbid, like what happened to Tracy Morgan, and something happens, that's different. You know what I'm saying? If you're if you just Joe Schmo and you deciding just to have a maladaptive coping strategy, and your strategy is just to buy liquor at every stop and buy up all the drugs, how is that our problem, right? Because the man who works at Rite Aid and CVS, he's not getting any extra insurance because of that, and he may have more pressure. You know what I'm saying? Because he doesn't have the financial resources you have. So again, I don't want to even pigeonhole substance use, right? Because there's a lot of other stressors that could be going on as well. But my point remains the same. If your coping strategy is gambling, you know what I'm saying, and you go spend all your money, the record label shouldn't be responsible because you're a gambling addict now. You know what I'm saying? Because if the man that works at McDonald's, if he goes and spends, and you know what I mean, as hard as he works, he goes and spends his check, there's nobody for him to talk to about how he needs extra insurance. And he needs it more.
Damn.
So listen, that's why I said I'm not killing Wale.
I don't know. I don't know. Wale may have a problem with you after this. I'm not sure.
Nah, man. Nah, I love Wale. I love Wale. You know what I mean? Listen, shout out to Wale. He was wearing them foam posits. He was wearing the Nike foam posits before everybody else was.
Yeah, he was. You're right.
Out in DC. But in terms of the seriousness of the conversation, I do agree that they should be supported. You know what I mean? But like with most arguments, sometimes you go down the rabbit hole. But what I was gonna say is, like, one thing that they said that was important, like Kid Cudi, they had a quote from him in the article, and he was saying, "I am not at peace. I haven't been at peace since you've known me. If I didn't come here, I would have done something to myself." Right? So again, it brings us back to it's kind of like we're always talking about this, how no matter how successful people are or these artists are, you don't know what people are going through, right? Because most people would assume that Kid Cudi's life is great, right? And I'm not saying his life isn't great, but I'm saying he has days like everybody else where he probably wake up like all of us and the world is on his shoulders. So
I always thought, or would have thought, it would have been indicative, and this turns into, like, of course, a financial issue, that given what artists go through, whether you're rap, country, R&B, or what have you, I always felt, or would have thought, it would have been indicative, maybe this is just me being optimistic or just foolish, I'm not sure, of that, like, the record company, you would want to have like these services available, right? You would want to have, given that what couldn't go wrong on the road and knowing what a lot of these artists get exposed to, right? Parties and other different things, like you would want to, if you're the company, to kind of reduce risk the same way that a lot of sports teams do, right? They'll offer that. Now it'll be up to the player whether they want to, you know, be involved or take them up on these services. But you would think that like, hey, you know what? We have services available. Not that it'd be through insurance, but it'd be like a situation where like, hey, you know, before these are the things that are offered, right? Just so I don't know, just as a to minimize or reduce risk. Because as you said, things can go left pretty quickly depending on the artist, depending on what they get exposure to, depending on where they are, and say, hey, you know what, given whatever stresses you may get exposed to, we have these services available. And I'm not to say that they don't, but I would think just from a financial aspect and say, hey, you know, let's offer this. This may be the difference, like you said, if for a Kid Cudi who says he hasn't been, you know, in a good place or it fluctuates with him, that he has someone that the record company is providing as a resource or support to. I don't know. I mean, I just thought that that would make sense in a perfect world, but again, it does come down to finances and a lot of other different things we would have to consider.
See,
I don't know.
this is the thing, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, right? The one difference between this and a lot of different other areas of business, whether we talk about like Wall Street, right, or the Dallas Cowboys, right? Jerry Jones has an incentive to protect his assets, right? Because if all his players aren't on the field, he's gonna lose money,
Right.
right? Lehman Brothers has an incentive, right? I'm not saying that they do everything, but they have an incentive to protect their employees, right? Because if they don't come in, they're gonna lose the bottom line. Musical artists are viewed as expendable, right? And especially nowadays, when we don't have the longevity with careers, and this is going to sound very controversial, it's almost contraindicated for them to do those things, right? Because some of these rappers, to them, to the corporations, they're worth more deceased,
Yeah, you're right about that.
right?
Unfortunately, yeah, a lot
If
of sales go up, man. Yeah.
let's look at Pop Smoke sales.
I was
And if
thinking the same
anybody who
thing.
thinks I'm being controversial, look at Mo 3 sales after he died. Look at Pop Smoke sales after he died. Look at Lil Peep sales after he died.
Yeah.
Look at Digital Underground. Look at DMX sales after they
XXX
died.
down, yeah, all them dudes. You're right.
So, and some of these dudes are dudes with catalogs, but especially for the ones that don't have worldwide reach, a lot of these guys, bro, it's there are murals of Pop Smoke up in different countries where I'm not saying his voice didn't reach before he died, but he wasn't immortalized. He's immortalized now. And it's unfortunate, right? Because the bigger issue is probably that Black life is cheap in America. We don't have to go. We know that. You understand what I'm saying? But in terms of just the bottom line with the businesses, with rap especially, a lot of these artists, unfortunately, look at the sales. They're worth more to these countries deceased. So why would they protect their lives, right? It's just a good thing to point out and debate.
No, you make a good point, and unfortunately, it's a true point. Like we talked about, you know, the Nipsey Hustles and all these other different artists. Unfortunately, they're more profitable when they have passed, right?
Right.
Streaming goes up, record sales, all the paraphernalia, all these other different things go up after the artist has passed on, which is unfortunate. But like you said, the companies only care about the bottom line, and that's the money. So, hopefully as things move forward, the music industry can start to do more as far as taking care of their artists, but I don't know, something for us to continue to monitor. Something that's often talked about, like we were just mentioning, is music. We talk about in the barbershop. All right. So article came across our desk about a barber named Ray Connor. And Ray Connor in this article traces his ambition to being a barber back to when he was growing up in Detroit. He was watching his mother battle drug and alcohol addiction. He experienced a lot of abuse. Sometimes he would go to bed hungry. And he says in the article, when he needed to get away, he went down to his barbershop for a fresh cut and companionship from his barber. He says that relationship with his barber saved his life by getting him through some of the darkest days of his life. So Connor, fast forward, now is a barber based out of Tennessee, and he's focused on not only being a barber, but also being a mentor to other young Black men facing adversity. So he took the initiative by joining a project called the Confess Project Barber Coalition. It's a nonprofit created to help Black men and boys become the best version of themselves by providing education on how to better take care of their mental health and give those same tools to support their clients when they come in the shop. What's your takeaway from this? I love this article. What were your thoughts about this, Jeff?
I mean, listen, I think it's a good thing to see, some people kind of on the ground taking this issue, taking a lead in terms of this issue, like reducing stigma and even taking a step further, right? Because they're kind of like learning skills in terms of how to engage with their clients and make them, I guess, get them more comfortable with like opening up and talking about their feelings and even connecting them to services, right? So I think it's good in terms of mentorship. We all know in terms of the barbershop, like what that has meant in terms of culture and tradition, specifically to African Americans. And I think it's a good place for it to be, right? Because if we look at the barbershop traditionally, that's where we've gone to argue about sports, discuss politics,
Mm-hmm.
religion. We eat there, we buy, we buy t-shirts, we buy
Everything.
all of those things. So, we joke about it, but for a lot of people, me including, I haven't been there in a while, you know what I mean? Because I got hair now, but the barbershop is just it's that type of environment, where we get, a lot of our mentorship, right? And we get a lot of advice and a lot of that goes on. So why not bring mental health into that environment? It makes perfect sense. And it's funny because like I was listening to 98.7, the morning show, ESPN, the morning show last week,
Yeah.
and Keyshawn and Jay Will was talking to Alan Hahn about like black barbershops.
Yeah, man.
And Keyshawn was trying to tell him like, yeah, you can buy a barbecue in there, you could buy a mixtape, you could do, and but the
Anything.
point he was trying to tell him like, I'm gonna take you, but the point he was trying to make is that you can get everything in there. You know what I mean? A lot of us, for those of us who are lucky enough, to grow up with male figures, those are some fond memories we have is sitting in a barbershop, with an older brother, older cousin. If you're lucky enough to have a father in your life, with your father, and hearing those adult conversations, right? So to bring that into the barbershop, I think is the perfect, you know, um, it's the perfect thing. And like they were saying, they're not trying to be therapists, but they could be a great bridge. So I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, man. Barbers are conversation pieces too. I don't know if you remember when when we first met, when we were sitting in the back of that writing class, right? And we were talking, we kind of gave ourselves like the nod, like, okay, there's more of us in this joint, right? And since you weren't from the area, you asked me about barbers. That was like one of the first conversations that we talked about, right? You
Like,
you
come,
asked me, you was
come.
like, yo, look, yo, you from the area? Like, I need, yo, where could I get a cut at, right? And I gave you a couple places and stuff. And that's how it starts. And you know, barbers, I always look at were like the original people that were placed in like that unspoken therapist role,
Right.
right? Because you got in the chair and you talked about anything, right? You talked about anything and it was wide open, right? It wasn't like you were just having that conversation. Like you and the barber could have that conversation, but you got the barber next to you, you got the people waiting, you got folks that are just there, right? Like
Yeah.
for me, like it's the barbershop is the original safe space for
Right.
us, right? Especially for black men. Like we talk about any and everything at the barbershop. Stuff that you don't have to worry about it not being PC, controversial, anything. Like we're talking about anything at the barbershop. And, like you said, I think it's the perfect place for you to have that discussion about mental health,
Yeah.
right? Because you're gonna have so many different views and as Ron talked about in the article, you talk about things that you've been through, right? You talk
Right.
about, your family members, yo, my cousin is on drugs, my homie did this the other day. Like you find out what's happening in the community, what's happening in the neighborhood, whose mom is doing what, who's dating who, all these other different things goes down at the barbershop. Like you said, you can buy anything. Everybody comes through there. And I feel like absolutely like to have a mental health discussion and to have these individuals who are getting training on not just to listen and have conversation, but to like listen with intent, right? To have that empathy and to be able to, have resources and say, hey, like when someone comes in and they're talking about some of their struggles, it's like they're sharing their struggles. And then it's like, hey, you know what? is this beyond like their training, their expertise? Because they said it. They said they're not therapists, which I was really happy to say that they actually distinguish and say we're not therapists. And if it goes beyond what they've been trained to do and show support, they have resources, man. Like they give out, resources. Oh, you know what? This is therapist over here, this support group over here, X, Y, and Z. And I feel like that's so beneficial because of how many people, when you think about it, go through the barbershop, right? How many people see the different barbers? How many people just kind of pop through when they're there? Like they're not even getting a cut. Like they just come through, say what's up, like you said, talk about sports, talk about other different things, politics, COVID. I know me and my barber, we've talked about like COVID. We talked about the mask thing because they've had to adjust to it, right, with the
Right.
spacing and other different protocols. So it's like I feel like that's the perfect place for to be able to model and have those discussions about mental health is in the barbershop.
And then on another note, in terms of breaking down stigma, like me personally, right? Like my barber, that's my man, so he don't do it all the time and it's all love, you know what I mean? But if I'm in there and he tell people what I do, you know what I'm saying? Or we're having a type of conversation about mental health, and like you said, everybody's kind of part of the conversation.
Right.
So it's not unusual for if we're having that type of conversation for him to tell the next person or what, like, yeah, my man, he's a psychologist or he's a therapist, and then then you start bringing in other opinions in terms of what they think about mental health, and you have those opportunities, right? Because those questions that we were talking about that people ask, like I've gotten them while I was sitting in the barber chair, right?
Right. No doubt.
About the things that you would think about, oh, my somebody sitting there waiting for a cut. Oh, my cousin got schizophrenia or this person or that person, and they're talking to you about family support, right?
Yeah.
Or about their experience, right? Um, so you have those opportunities, or they just are surprised to see you doing that, right? So it's in there, and so there might be questions about, oh, I didn't, I haven't really seen a lot of brothers doing this, or black people or people of color or whatever, and you have that opportunity, right? On so many levels. So and then you have people who they don't want nothing to do with mental health, and they don't, and after they find out, they don't want to talk to you, and they don't want you in there. You know what I'm saying? But you're gonna find that anywhere, with that resistance. But on a serious note, again, you have that opportunity to break down that stigma. So it's just so many ways that it could be beneficial, to kind of bring those kind of services into the barbershop, or just, help people, have access to those while they're in there. So
Yeah, because the thing that I don't think a lot of people we really realize it when we go into the barbershop. But one of the two things that when we're having discussions at the shop is that you're looking for two things. You're looking for validation, you're looking for positive reinforcement, right? You're
right,
going in there, no matter what you're thinking, like you're looking for somebody to agree with you, right? Whether it be
right,
about sports, whether it be about politics, whether it be about girls, whether it be talking about, your marriage or relationships, like you're looking for validation for whatever your thoughts are about it. And it's like you said, it's an opportunity. It's a teaching moment, right? Like, when they find out what we do, they be like, for real? Like, oh, you mean like you a doctor? Like you do, right? They ask the question, so you could do meds, and then you kind of clear things up and you talk about, like you said, the therapy. It's a teaching moment, right? It's a
right,
perfect opportunity to like, have these conversations. They're able to ask questions, right? Like, well, what do you think about this? Or like you said, my mom had this, or this family member, they ask about different drugs. They ask you a question, your opinion on it. And like, they really do listen because you're in the shop, right? Now you have not only they know who you are because they've seen you in the shop like for years, but now you have the expertise that's attached to it, right? You show them the education. And like, even when I told my barber about like our podcast, it was like episode 2 or 3, and I'm like, listen, like, got this podcast and asked him about advertising in the shop, and he's like, well, why you didn't tell me episode 1? Like, you 3 episodes late. You see what I mean? But it's that support, right? Like you
yeah,
said, you can come in and and tell people about what you're doing and promote. And that's also another thing of the shop. Of in addition to being the safe space, man, it's love. Like you said, you get the opportunity. Might go in, like your brother's going to bring you in, but then you gain so many different people and
right,
friends and extensions of your family because you see them every week, right? You see them every couple of weeks when you go in there. You see the same people. They ask you about your family. They ask you about it becomes such a great sense of community at the shop. And what I liked about this is that this barbershop, they do workshops there, right? They do workshops, they do meetings, they're help, they're affecting so many people in so many different ways and getting them the resources. And it's great, right? Because the people are already there,
Right.
right? You already have that respect and that trust, that relationship with your barber. And now if he's able to give you some information on how to live a healthier life, you're talking about your mental health and he's getting that work, people are prone to listen, right? So, I'm loving this, man. I'm loving it. I'm about to get at my barber and ask how come he's not involved in this, because I think, the article said that they're like in 16 different cities. And I didn't see Philadelphia. I didn't see my barbershops on the list. So I feel like my barber's slacking. And I'm definitely going to tell him to listen to this episode so he can
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
me airing them out right now.
I'm gonna have to talk to my man too, because he be giving me definitely be giving me some good advice. So you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
but it serves as a model for black men and boys to be like, yo, it's okay, right? It's okay to openly talk about your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions, like because we talk about anything else in there,
Right.
right? So yeah, it's
Right.
already kind of setting that model in it. It's just now, okay, now this is also a good space. It's okay to talk about some of the real things that are going on in your life. So, so yeah, I'm hoping that this continues to grow. We'll continue to watch this, and this is just a really dope initiative. Like this is great, and I love, along like with the broga that we talked about a couple episodes ago, and the coffee shop. Like I love seeing ventures like this that are getting into our community and getting, and like you said, reducing the stigma and getting information out, man. So I'm loving it. This is great. You
Yep.
know?
Yep. Definitely a good one.
So a couple episodes when we had Dr. Ashley on, we talked about one of the main questions that we always get when we tell people that we're therapists, is are you reading my mind? Are you psychoanalyzing me? I think probably next in line after that question that I typically get is people will ask me, well, do therapists go to therapy, or do we just know how to handle our own issues based off our
Right.
training? Right. And, mine's is a hard no, we go to therapy also.
Right.
Absolutely. Um, so this stems from an article that came across our desk, in which a therapist who's worked in the field for almost 20 years, and she's written 4 books on mental strength and happiness, and all of them have been bestsellers. And in addition to that, she shares, like everyone else, that she's been through a lot of tough times. She mentions that in her early 20s, she lost her husband and her mom, and she experienced a lot of grief and a lot of setbacks due to that during her time, and she lives a great life now. However, she still goes to see a therapist to ensure that she's living life to her fullest and to make sure that she's being, the best type of clinician that she can. So I thought, this was a good article. What were some of your takeaways as you were reading this?
I mean, listen, I thought it was a good one. Of course, the answer is yes. You know what I mean? But I thought it did a good job of kind of like chipping away at some misconceptions, right? Because when I talk to people, I think the first misconception a lot of people have is that therapy is for fixing people, right? And what I mean by that is like, yes, some people, it's just a fact. Some people go to therapy because they have certain deficits in certain areas of their life, right? So if that qualifies for you helping to them to fix themselves, fix my life or whatever, not to reference that in any way, um, then yes, that could qualify for fixing, right?
Right.
But most people don't go to therapy for fixing, right? Most people are going to go for motivational purposes. People are going to go for more supportive purposes, right?
Hmm.
So I think that is a good thing that they were talking about, because they were kind of talking about, you know, she was kind of talking about how her therapist kind of helps her point out when she's thinking about things irrationally, right? Or points out times like where her emotions might cloud their judgment. And I think that's more of what a lot of therapists do, especially when you're in a longer term kind of relationship with people, is that you're both got your hands on the wheel. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
But and you may be guiding or helping the person guide the ship, but there's no fixing going on. You know what I mean? So I think they did a good job in terms of kind of pointing out, why individuals go to therapy, right? Because I think that contributes to the stigma. if people think that you go to therapy because it's a deficit and there's something wrong with you, you know what I mean? Then that's going to be a different mindset than a person that's going for support, right? Because it's going to be the difference between somebody who thinks they're going to the medical doctor, right? Because I hurt my leg and I need you to fix it, and somebody who is done with their mark in terms of therapy, and they're like, yeah, 86% is good, but I want to get back to 98%. It's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's something that needs to kind of be spoken on, right? Because when we talk about like different races, when we talk about socioeconomic status, they view therapy differently. And
Totally
that
different.
affects who goes to therapy, right? Because if I'm a rich person, I am going to be in the gym saying, yeah, Dr. Kyle, you know what? I pay Dr. J every week. That's my therapist, right? I'm going to be saying the same way. And that's my therapist, and that's my trainer, and that's my cardiologist, and that's my landscaper, right? Whereas, you know, other individuals may view it and they're hiding, right? Because they view it as if, you know, it's something that reflects negatively on them, right? So um, I think that we got to kind of change that part in terms of the stigma, and I think they did a good job of pointing that part out, you know.
Yeah, I definitely think there's that misconception. Just because of our education and our expertise in this field doesn't make us immune to any type of emotional distress.
Right.
Um, we're human beings. We experience issues just like anyone else, right? Like you said, just because people we're helping people through their issues and facilitating growth in other individuals doesn't mean that we're not experiencing that also. So like you talked about, you have that that kind of that black or white thinking where it's just like, well, the only people that get therapy are the folks that are mentally ill or crazy, and you have the people that aren't mentally ill or crazy and they don't need therapy,
Right.
where no, there's a total gray area in between, and everybody experiences issues, right? Unfortunately, we've all lost people, we've all experienced a lot of these stressors. There's so much emotional distress that goes along with going to school, with work, with all these other different things. I think about, as far as therapists, absolutely, or clinicians, we absolutely should take the initiative, or if we have the opportunity to get therapy, to do so. I mean, if you think about our line of work, I
Right.
mean, you know one would be our own mental health, right? Making sure that we're the best clinician that we can be so we can help others, right? We're always telling that to our patients to say, and our clients to say, listen, you have to take care of yourself. You need self-care. You have
Right.
to do all these X, Y, and things like you just mentioned, making sure that you have all your areas of your life, your support, your medical doctor, your therapist, your trainer, right? You have all these other different areas, or all these different professionals helping you in these different areas. And absolutely, like, we need that also, just like the woman mentioned in the article. Especially for us, I mean, we take on a lot of other people's emotional burdens as we work, right? And so that lends itself also to a period of isolation, because due to confidentiality, due to HIPAA, due to all these other different things, we hear and see a lot of tough stuff, right? A lot of tough material that we get exposed to. You especially, you see it with your assessments when you work with kids. I work on an inpatient unit. I see a lot of, chronic mentally ill individuals that are dealing with a lot of, tough, severe symptoms. And it's not like we can run home and go tell everybody about that, right?
Right.
It's not like we can go back, we can, talk about all these different things. And depending on, say, if, you're, as a clinician, where you're in the environment that you work at, like for those that work in private practice, they may be working by themselves. So when they hear a lot of tough information, they don't necessarily have a coworker to talk to,
Right.
right? They may not be able to go out with somebody at lunch and be able to kind of decompress, or kind of, vent and get that refresher. So, and then also difficult clients, right? You and I both have had difficult clients. And unlike in customer service, you can't just like refuse to serve someone just because they're not behaving,
Right.
or their behavior is out of line, right? You can't just be
Right.
like, all right, yo, you can't come back to the store anymore, right?
It don't
No,
work like that.
that's not the way it works. So we, as clinicians, as therapists, I'm not complaining by any means. However, absolutely. Like, I think it's indicative that we do seek out that type of support. If we, we have the opportunity to, we make it, like you said, kind of having that, like the same way we treat our car, right? You want to have that checkup, or
Right.
even just having someone like ourselves, like we get an opportunity to do that. You and I have an opportunity to talk about cases or talk about things that we're experiencing. So we have that peer support. But it's also good, again, for us to have a therapist or someone that we see to kind of help us manage through our own stuff, right? Check up on ourselves. Because again, if I'm going through stuff, I'm not at my best. There's no way I'm going to be able to help this individual that's sitting in front of me, that's trusting me to help them.
It's a fact.
You know, so I really like this article. This shines a light again on a lot of different things, or those misconceptions, right? That, either or, black or white type of thinking, or also just shows that, yeah, we as clinicians, that since we are doing and caring for a lot of the people, absolutely, like we need, to take care of ourselves in every aspect of things. So I like this article.
Yeah, I did too, man. A lot of good, information. And again, I think it does a lot to kind of clearly talk about, the differences between, going for a specific for a specific reason like grief, you know what I mean? And kind of maintenance after that in terms of using therapy for that after. So a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it, man. Honestly, I think once people, I think it's the hardest, as getting into that therapy part, right? Like
Yeah,
where it's like, getting through that first couple sessions and then realizing how, I mean, I'm not trying to be biased, but how comfortable you can be in therapy, right? Like I enjoyed being in therapy, my personal experience, because I was just able to go in there and talk about shit. Like
right,
stuff that I was going through professionally, personally, and it was refreshing to go through that. And our mental health fluctuates. I don't know if maybe people realize, just as clinicians, again, just because we have our expertise and this high level of academic training, that like our mental health doesn't fluctuate. You know, like there are days where I feel like I'm mentally sharp, like I'm the best therapist and clinician in the world.
right.
And then other days I feel like I'm a total imposter. I have no business. I have no business talking or helping anybody. But it's helpful. Like when I get a chance to talk to you. I talk to other colleagues when I've been in therapy in the past, to be like, hey, you know what? Like it's helpful to help me get through that. And I hope not only us, but any other clinicians that are in any type of health field also continue, or take the opportunity to get therapy. Because, like you said, you don't necessarily, like you said, have to be broken or be fixed or have a particular issue. It may just be dealing with stress
Right.
that you may be able to see and talk to a professional. So, yeah, this was good. I like a lot of things that they highlighted in this article.
Yeah, definitely a good one.
All right. So, anything else that you wanted to let the people know about?
No, just of course we want to thank everybody for the support. Definitely humble, thankful for that. I want to encourage everybody to continue to subscribe if you haven't. We appreciate it. Thank everybody for listening, liking the videos, and please share if you can. That's it.
Absolutely. I highlight and echo everything you said. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's May. So please make sure that you're taking care of yourself, guys. It's not easy out there. We have a lot of, things are becoming less restrictive depending on what state you're in. Stress levels are at all-time high. So guys, please make sure you're taking care of yourselves, your self-care. And like Dr. J said, we appreciate everybody listening, subscribing, watching. We're on all the podcast platforms, YouTube, subscribe, listen, feedback. Also, guys, we really love your feedback and your comments. Dr. J and I have absolutely been emerged and been active with responding to a lot of the comments and your feedback and your ideas. So keep those coming, because we want to talk about things that are relevant to you and what's going on in your life. So keep them coming. We appreciate all the support. All right. So if nothing else, Dr. J, always a pleasure. I'll see you next time, my friend.
All right, bro. I'm out.
All right, bro.